It says here some generic red department stores having a crazy discount on Jumpstart packs. Oh my goodness. What have I done? Hello friendos, this is Chain, welcoming you back to Chain of Commander. It is the day after American Thanksgiving, more colloquially known as Black Friday, the day capitalism decides to show us mercy and offer us amazing discounts on things. And I don't think we should be any different. I am also going to give you some excellent ways to save on your mana costs. Now, before we get into it, I do ask if you end up enjoying this sort of content, consider subscribing, hitting that like button. I'd love to see it. And if any of these cards ignite a deck building spark inside you, definitely use that TCG Player affiliate link below. Won't cost you a single cent more, but it will help out the channel. Now, let's get into it here, because we got plenty of ways to save, and the first couple we have are for our artifact decked friends. The first one I have for you here, Affinity. Affinity is a mechanic that essentially says affinity for X, and X could be islands, artifacts, but more commonly we see them with artifacts. Affinity for X, where the spell costs X less for each X you control. So if it's affinity for artifacts and you have 3 artifacts when you go to cast it, then it costs 3 less. Now these sort of spells, these were things that were kind of heavily costed. You look at an effect like Thought Cast, which was 4 and a blue, 5 mana to draw 2 cards. That's kind of expensive, but it had affinity for artifacts. So if you had 4 artifacts out there, that thing would only cost a single blue mana, and that is a really good rate. 1 blue mana, 2 cards, I'd make that any day. Essentially, that's 2/3 of an Ancestral Recall. There you go. So obviously, this particular mechanic for a lot of decks is very easy to exploit. In fact, in Modern, it resulted in the ban of pretty much the artifact lands. Essentially everything but Darksteel Citadel got banned because it was just too easy to use those to get free artifacts every turn and make your spells cheaper. But in Commander, those lands are legal. You can play them. You can make all your affinity stuff super cheap. Now, fast forward a couple years. Wizards like, okay, we have another artifact set coming up, but we don't want affinity because it's stupid bonkers broken. What can we do to fix it? They gave us a reasonable discount in the form of Improvise. Unlike affinity, which just gave you the discount, Improvise you have to earn. You got to redeem your coupons, if you will. Improvise says that for a spell with Improvise, you can pay for any amount of its generic cost by tapping an untapped artifact control to pay for one of it. So no longer do you just get the bonus, you have to have an untapped artifact that you can use to tap to pay for this effect. But they were nice enough to allow us to use this effect on many, many cards because they printed a specific card, Inspiring Statuary, which gave all of our non-artifact spells Improvise. So let's say you're running a commander like Psymaster Thopterist or the new Togo, the guy that makes the rocks from Commander Legends. You're going to be pumping out artifact tokens left and right. If you also have something like Saheeli Sublime Artificer, which also is pumping out artifact tokens, there's a decent chance in combination with these guys and with your Inspiring Statuary that you will not be paying a single mana towards any of your generic costs for the rest of the game, barring obviously artifacts, which might not have that effect. So this is a great way, and there's a lot of cool spells built into this effect too, even without the Inspiring Statuary. You got Metallic Rebuke, which is essentially like a mana drain and stuff like that, or mana leak rather. If it was a mana drain, ooh-wee. But, I mean, Inspiring Statuary and Spell Swindle, I mean, it's essentially a mana drain. Keep that in mind. The next one we have here, this is kind of a similar effect really, but this one's for our token buddies. Back on Ravnica, the Selesnya Guild, they had a very specific mechanic called Convoke. Convoke is essentially the same as Improvise, but instead of tapping untapped artifacts, you can tap untapped creatures. And these creatures can also contribute towards the spell's colored mana cost. This is the only mechanic on the list that actually can go towards colored mana costs of the spell. So let's say you have a Convoke spell, let's say Court of Calling, which is 3 green and X. You can pay the green by tapping 3 green creatures, and then you can tap like 5 white creatures for the X and go get something X5 or less. Court of Calling and things like March Multitude. These are instants. In green-white and Selesnya, you know what these things do? They make a bunch of tokens, and they can give them vigilance. The fact that these 2 spells, which I think are 2 of the more powerful spells with Convoke, are instants means that you can go into combat, swing with a bunch of tiny 1/1 vigilant tokens, and then, while in combat, tap them to pay for this Convoke cost of something like Court of Calling. Grab Craterhoof Behemoth. Now you got these giant, huge tokens swinging in. You get the benefit of them attacking and them paying for the spell. So, very easy way to kind of take advantage of this Convoke mechanic and really just like essentially for free. If you have enough creatures, these spells are free to just really step it up a notch and do powerful effects like tutoring out a Craterhoof Behemoth directly to the battlefield. That's just silly. The next one we have, this is one that really got explored back in the Cons of Tarkir days. This is for our graveyard friends, and that will be Delve. Delve, another way to kind of pay for generic mana cost, says that if a card has Delve, you can exile a card from your graveyard to pay for one of its generic mana costs, and you can do that as many times as there's generic mana costs. Very similar to Infinity, these spells were highly costed with the thought that, oh, you'll be able to maybe delve 2 or 3 to get them down to a reasonable cost, but turns out that isn't always the case. A lot of decks are very apt at filling up their graveyard very, very quickly to the point where Delve is essentially free real estate. Spells like Murderous Cut becomes 1 black mana to kill any creature. Dig Through Time becomes 2 blue mana to just look through the top 7 cards of your library and grab 2. And then, you essentially can make your own Ancestral Recall with Treasure Cruise, which is 7 and a blue. But if you got 7 cards to delve away, that is 1 blue mana to draw 3 cards. Dig Through Time, Treasure Cruise, these cards have been banned or restricted in almost every single format they've ever touched. Except Commander. This is where you can play these essentially Power 9 level cards and just shove them in there. Just put them in your deck. It's great. I have decks with them in it, and they are fun. It's the closest I will personally ever get to playing a Power 9 card, and it's probably the closest many of you can too, so do it. The last one we have here, well, kind of the last one. I'll have another one later, but the last major discount we have here, this one is more like all the other ones we had allowed you to make a pay towards their CMC. This effect, this is the one that actually gives you an alternate cost to pay, kind of like trade-in versus paying for something. And that is the Miracle mechanic. The Miracle mechanic essentially says if this is the first card you draw for your turn, you can pay its Miracle cost and just pay it right away. And these Miracle costs tend to be aggressively undercosted from the actual cost of the spell. The cool thing about this is if you have any way to do just generic top deck manipulation, then you can easily set up these Miracle costs. And they can really, their Miracle costs tend to be super, super well costed for the effect. I'm looking at things like Reforge the Soul. This is just a generic wheel. It does the same thing that Wheel of Fortune does. Everybody discards their hand and draw 7. It normally costs 5, but if you cast a first Miracle cost, it costs 2. That is cheaper than a Wheel of Fortune. Now, you only get the Miracle cost if you pay it as soon as you draw it. So you need to be prepared. It does take a little bit of planning ahead. But you can duplicate and mimic amazing abilities at super cheap costs. You can entreat the angels and just make a whole bunch of angels on the cheap. You can Terminus, and for 1 white mana, just tuck everything to the bottom of his library. Truly, the greatest of all the discounts. I think this one is, indeed, the best discount sort of mechanic just because of the pure raw power that you're getting for these cards for absurdly cheap prices. Now, let's say you are super stingy. You don't want to spend a single cent on your mana cost or anything like this. Well, we do have a couple options then, maybe not so ethical. First, we have the Pact cycle. These are things like Pact of Negation, Summoner's Pact, Slaughter Pact. These are cards that you can cast for absolutely free when you cast them. but you do need to pay for them at the beginning of your next upkeep. So it's essentially like buying something with a credit card, and the cost to pay is actually kind of expensive, but you get that benefit of getting it free now and worrying about it later, like your credit card. Then there's the expertise cycle. These are kind of like the 2-for-1 specials, where you can cast the expertise, Rishkar's expertise, Bantu's expertise, Baral's expertise, and that'll give you effect. Like in Rishkar's expertise, will draw cards equal to the largest creature control, and then you can cast a spell for 5 or less as the spell resolves. So you're getting 2 spells for the price of 1. Not too shabby. And then, let's say you want to just trade in something, then you got the pitch cycle. These are things like Force of Will, Force of Negation, Force of Vigor, things that say you can exile a card from your hand in lieu of paying its mana cost. So it's kind of like trading 2 for 1, kind of like going to a thrift store or bargain outlet and trading your beater cards, your 2 beater cards for 1 not so beater card. That doesn't make any sense. Ignore that analogy. And then if you really just want to get it for free, you can essentially steal them with As Foretold and Omniscience. As Foretold gets slightly bigger, lets you cast 1 free spell a turn, and gets progressively larger to the size of spells that you can cast. And Omniscience, it's just the 5-finger discount of Magic. You just get to play stuff for free when you want it, as you want it, for free. So, those are some ways that you can save on your mana costs, and hopefully you can use your savings to invest in a reasonable stock portfolio. Get that Roth IRA going. Imagine how much money you'll have later. What is the Roth IRA of Magic? It's probably that new rock thing, Horizon Stone or whatever. I'll put a picture here. It lets you store your mana away. You just don't get any interest on it. So I'm wondering. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you all enjoyed your Thanksgiving and are looking forward to the holiday seasons. I have a big announcement coming up next Friday, so keep an eye out for that. But till then, everybody take care, stay safe, keep your loved ones healthy. I'll see you guys again in the future.